He wasn't staring at the boy's face, he was staring at his hand, and he wouldn't look away. Seconds later, a hidden poison and a fleeing shadow turned a quiet night into a race against death. The streets of Oak Ridge looked empty under the soft orange glow of the streetlights, the kind of quiet that seemed almost too heavy, like the town itself was holding its breath. Officer Daniel Hayes guided the patrol car down Main Street, his hand resting lightly on the wheel, his eyes sweeping over storefronts and alleys that were usually more alive during the day. Tonight they were still, shadows pressed tight against the brick walls, neon signs flickering faintly in the windows of shops that had closed hours ago. The radio crackled now and then with static, but no calls came through, only the soft hum of silence. For most people, that kind of calm would feel like safety, but Daniel knew better. Quiet nights often carried the loudest surprises. Beside him in the passenger seat sat Rex, his canine partner, a German shepherd with a rough coat of black and tan, peppered with scars that told stories of fights and survival. A long mark ran across his muzzle, another along his flank, but none of them dulled the fire in his amber eyes. Those eyes were restless tonight, flicking from window to alley, his ears twitching with every sound. His body shifted, paws tapping against the seat, tail stiff, nose pressed to the crack of the window. He wasn't at ease. Not the way Daniel hoped he would be on a quiet patrol. Daniel took a sip from the coffee cup balanced in the holder, lukewarm and bitter, and sighed. "Relax, partner," he muttered, though he didn't expect Rex to listen. He never did when something was stirring in the air. That was the thing about the dog, he felt the world in ways Daniel couldn't. Where Daniel saw silence, Rex smelled movement. Where Daniel heard nothing, Rex heard everything. Tonight, that awareness was making him restless, and Daniel could feel it too, like a low current running under his skin. They passed the school playground, its swings swaying faintly, though no wind touched them. Rex's head snapped toward it, ears forward, nose twitching. Daniel slowed the car, eyes scanning the fenced yard. Nothing moved except the shadows of the swings, but Rex stayed locked, his body tense. After a moment, Daniel eased the car forward again, but he didn't miss the way Rex's hackles bristled before he settled back into the seat. The night stretched on in long minutes, tires rolling over damp asphalt, the town seeming smaller with each block. They passed rows of houses with porch lights glowing, curtains drawn tight. Somewhere, a dog barked in the distance and was silenced quickly, the sound leaving behind an emptiness that felt unnatural. Daniel tapped the wheel with his fingers, the rhythm soft and steady, but his eyes kept drifting toward Rex, toward the unspoken warning in the shepherd's restless body. He had learned over the years that Rex's instincts were rarely wrong. If the dog was uneasy, there was a reason, even if Daniel couldn't see it yet. Tonight, something was out there, waiting, and though the streets looked calm and the radio stayed silent, Daniel knew this patrol was only just beginning. The corner store sat at the edge of Oak Ridge, its neon sign buzzing faintly above the glass door, the only patch of brightness on a street that had grown darker as the night moved on. Daniel slowed the patrol car as he saw movement near the entrance. A boy standing awkwardly by the door like he couldn't decide whether to go inside or keep walking. Daniel knew most of the kids in town, or at least their faces, but this one he recognized clearly. Ethan Miller, 12 years old, son of a mechanic who ran the garage near the highway. Daniel remembered him as a lively kid who usually had a basketball under his arm, or a smile quick enough to light up a room, but tonight there was none of that. Tonight he looked pale, his body stiff, his hand clutched close to his chest as if holding something fragile. Daniel pulled the car to the curb, the headlights sweeping over the boy for a brief moment before dimming as he cut the engine. Rex was already alert, ears pricked, body leaning forward against the seatbelt loop, his amber eyes fixed not on the boy's face, but on the way he held his hand. There was no wag of his tail, no soft whine of recognition like he sometimes gave when he saw familiar children. Instead, his body was tense, his ears pressed flat, His whole frame braced as though he had seen something that no one else had noticed. Daniel stepped out of the car slowly, his boots scuffing against the damp pavement, the night air cooler here, away from the steady hum of downtown. "Evening, Ethan," he called gently, trying not to spook the boy. Ethan looked up sharply, his face pale under the streetlight, his lips pressed tight together. He didn't answer right away, only shifted his weight and tried to tuck his hand even closer to his chest. Daniel's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in concern. Behind him, the sound of claws clicked softly as Rex jumped down from the car, his body lowering as he approached, his gaze never leaving the boy's hidden hand. A low rumble started deep in the dog's throat, not a growl meant for fear, but a warning, steady and unshaken, the kind that meant something wasn't right. Daniel crouched a little, lowering his voice. "You okay, son? Did something happen?" Ethan swallowed hard, his free hand curling into a fist at his side. His breathing was uneven, his shoulders stiff. For a moment it looked like he might run, but instead he whispered, so soft Daniel almost missed it, "It burns." The words hung in the air, chilling and fragile. Daniel stepped closer, trying to see past the sleeve Ethan kept pulled down. He caught a faint whiff of something sharp in the air. Not dirt, not sweat, but chemical, stinging in his nose. Rex gave a sharp bark, one step forward, his nose close to the boy's arm, his body rigid. Daniel's pulse quickened. Something was wrong here, badly wrong, and as he looked at Ethan's pale face and the dog's unwavering stare, he knew the night was about to change in ways he hadn't imagined. Daniel lowered himself slowly, the damp night air pressing cool against his neck as he crouched in front of the boy. Ethan shifted back a step, his sneakers scraping against the concrete, his face pale under the flickering light of the store's neon sign. Daniel lifted his hands, palms open, showing he meant no harm. He had done this 100 times with frightened kids, but something about the way Ethan hugged his arm to his chest made his heart pound harder than it should. He was about to speak, to ask the boy what had happened, when Rex's growl cut through the silence. It wasn't a loud growl, not the kind that came with bared teeth and fury, but low and steady, a sound from deep in the dog's chest that sent a shiver crawling up Daniel's spine. Rex stood close, muscles tense, amber eyes locked on the boy's hidden hand. He didn't blink, didn't look away, his body drawn taut like a bowstring. Daniel glanced at him, then back at Ethan, the weight of that growl telling him more than words ever could. Something wasn't right. Ethan winced then, his lips pulling tight as if he was trying to keep a cry from escaping. His shoulders trembled, and finally, in a voice no louder than a breath, he whispered, "It burns." The words cracked in the air, sharp and raw, and Daniel felt his stomach drop. Slowly, carefully, he reached forward. "Let me see, son," he said, keeping his voice calm, but the boy shook his head and tried to step back again. That was when Daniel smelled it, faint but sharp, cutting through the damp night air. It wasn't smoke or gasoline or anything familiar from the streets. It was chemical, sterile, and wrong, the kind of smell that clung to labs and hospital hallways, not the hands of a 12-year-old boy. Rex took another step forward, his nose working furiously, his ears pinned back. His growl grew stronger, not aggressive, but insistent, a demand for Daniel to pay attention. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes catching the edge of Ethan's sleeve, where it had slipped just enough to reveal angry red skin. The flesh around his wrist looked swollen, tight, and in the center of it was a small, dark puncture, the mark of something sharp forced into his skin. Daniel's chest tightened as he looked at the wound, then back at the boy's frightened face. Ethan's breathing was shallow, his forehead slick with sweat despite the cool night. "Who did this?" Daniel asked, his voice steady, though every part of him wanted to shout. Ethan shook his head again, tears welling in his eyes, his lips trembling as if words were trapped behind fear. Rex pressed closer, his body angled protectively, his tail stiff, his attention never breaking from the wound. Daniel knew the dog wasn't just reacting to blood or pain, he was reacting to something deeper, something dangerous. The smell lingered sharp in the air, clinging to them like a warning no one could ignore. Daniel felt it too, the truth settling heavy in his gut. This was no accident, no scrape from a fall or cut from broken glass. Someone had done this to the boy, and whatever was in his veins wasn't safe, not normal, not anything he had seen before. The fabric of Ethan's sleeve slid back when his trembling fingers tried to tug it into place, and in that small, accidental movement, the truth revealed itself. Daniel saw the angry red mark, the swelling flesh around a dark puncture, the skin stretched tight as if fighting against something foreign inside it. The sight made his chest seize, the air feel heavier, as though the night had just thickened with danger. Ethan jerked his arm back, but it was too late. The wound was there for both Daniel and Rex to see. Rex whined, a sharp and urgent sound that broke through the silence like an alarm. His paw pressed against Daniel's knee as if begging him to act faster, to understand the weight of what stood before them. His amber eyes flicked from the boy's wound back to Daniel's face, demanding attention, demanding action. Daniel felt the pressure in that look, the force of instinct he had learned long ago never to ignore. "Ethan," Daniel said softly, though his throat was dry, "what happened to you?" The boy's lips trembled, his breath uneven, his whole body fighting against the words he carried. Finally they spilled out in a broken rush. "A man grabbed me," he whispered, his voice cracking under the memory. "He stuck me with something." For a moment, the world tilted, the ground beneath Daniel seeming to shift sideways. The store lights blurred at the edges of his vision, his heart hammering so loud it drowned out the hum of traffic on the far road. He had handled robberies, fights, even shootings, but this was different. A child standing in front of him with poison or drugs or worse running through his veins was a kind of horror that left no easy path. Daniel fought to steady his voice. "Where did this happen?" he asked, keeping calm, though every part of him wanted to shake the answers out of the night. Ethan shook his head, his eyes shining with tears, fear clamping down on him too tightly to let words out. Daniel reached for his radio, but Rex's sudden growl dragged his attention away. The dog's head snapped toward the alley beside the store, his ears stiff, body rigid, every hair on his back bristling. Daniel followed his gaze and caught the faintest blur of movement, a shadow slipping away into the darkness. His pulse spiked. Whoever had done this wasn't far. Rex lunged forward, barking with a raw, commanding sound that echoed against the brick walls. Daniel rose, pulling Ethan gently behind him, his eyes fixed on the alley's mouth. He knew he had a decision to make, one that weighed heavier because of the boy swaying unsteady at his side. He could wait for backup, or he could trust Rex's instincts and give chase. The boy's shallow breath rasped beside him, and Daniel knew waiting wasn't an option. The threat wasn't hidden anymore. It was here, alive in the night, and it had already marked its victim. Rex barked again, the sound like a battle cry, and Daniel tightened his grip on the radio, his free hand already reaching for his weapon. Rex's head snapped so suddenly toward the alley that Daniel barely had time to follow the motion before the sound of rushing footsteps cut through the night. A shadow peeled away from the wall, long legs pumping, the shape of a man running fast into the dark. For half a second, Daniel froze, the weight of Ethan's trembling form at his side holding him still, but then instinct took over. He shoved the radio to his shoulder and barked out a call for backup, his voice clipped with urgency. Then he bolted after the fleeing figure. Rex was already gone, a streak of muscle and fury tearing across the pavement, his paws hitting hard and fast. His body stretched in long strides, teeth bared, ears pinned back against his skull. His growl rolled like thunder, warning anyone within earshot that the hunt had begun. Daniel's boots pounded after him, the night air cold in his lungs, the smell of damp asphalt and trash from the alley rushing over him as he sprinted. The suspect glanced back once, just long enough for Daniel to catch the glint of pale skin under the streetlight, and the flash of something clenched tight in his hand. Then the man was swallowed by shadow again, his body twisting through the narrow passage. The alley was littered with broken crates and tipped trash cans, but Rex weaved through them like a predator born for this moment. His bark echoed off the brick walls, sharp and commanding, driving the man forward in panic. Daniel pushed harder, his chest burning, sweat pricking at his temples, his hand hovering near the holster at his belt. The figure ahead stumbled once, crashed into a stack of cardboard, then pushed off again, but the hesitation was enough. Rex surged closer, the distance closing with terrifying speed. The man tried to dodge left, cutting down a side path, but Rex anticipated the move. He launched forward, his body colliding with the suspect's legs, jaws clamping down just above the ankle. A scream ripped through the night, high and furious, as the man collapsed onto the damp ground. The syringe he had been clutching skittered across the pavement, spinning to a stop in a puddle of dirty water. Daniel reached them seconds later, heart hammering, gun drawn but steady. Rex had the man pinned, his teeth locked firm but not lethal, his growl vibrating through the man's body as he writhed and cursed. Daniel kicked the syringe out of reach, his boot sending it clattering against the wall. "Stay down," he barked, voice sharp and commanding. The suspect thrashed, tried to twist free, but Rex bore down harder, his body unmoving, his eyes blazing with fury. The night that had felt so quiet only minutes ago now pulsed with noise. Daniel's breath came heavy, his radio crackled with incoming voices, and the man beneath Rex's jaws gasped like a trapped animal. Still, Daniel felt the shift in the air, the moment when control returned. The chase was over. The predator had been caught, and it wasn't by him, it was by the scarred shepherd who had known from the start that danger was close. Rex slammed the man to the ground with the kind of force that came from instinct sharpened by years of training and survival. The suspect's cry echoed against the brick walls of the alley as his body hit the wet pavement. His arms flailed, trying to crawl away, but Rex was unrelenting, his jaws locked firm around the man's leg, his body planted like stone. The growl that rumbled out of him was low and steady, the kind of sound that told anyone listening there would be no escape. Daniel arrived seconds later, chest heaving from the run, his boots splashing through puddles as he came up behind them. The sight was fierce and final. Rex, holding the man as if he had been born to end this chase. "Stay down," Daniel barked, his voice sharp, his gun drawn. The man twisted, eyes wide and wild, sweat dripping down his forehead despite the cold night. He tried to kick Rex with his free leg, but the shepherd shifted quickly, bearing down harder, forcing another scream out of him. Daniel moved fast, kicking the suspect's backpack to the side and then pressing his knee into the man's back. With practiced hands he wrenched one arm behind him, the steel cuffs snapping shut with a harsh click. The other arm followed just as backup sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer with every second. The suspect cursed, spitting into the dirt, his voice cracking with rage. "You don't know what you're messing with," he hissed, but Daniel ignored him. He pushed the man flat against the pavement, while Rex kept watch, teeth still bared, eyes unblinking. When the backup lights flooded the alley, painting the walls in red and blue, Daniel finally pulled the man upright. He stumbled, his body weak and shaking, and that was when the stench hit the acrid tang of chemicals seeping from the half-open backpack. One of the arriving officers grabbed the bag, unzipped it, and froze. Inside were vials filled with cloudy liquid, small plastic bags of white powder, and syringes capped and uncapped, some stained with residue. Daniel's stomach tightened. The boy's words rang in his ears like a bell he couldn't silence. "He stuck me with something." Rex whined softly now, his hackles still raised, but his voice quieter, as if he understood the weight of what they had found. Daniel turned his eyes toward the street, where Ethan stood under the watch of a young officer, his thin body hunched, his injured arm cradled tight. His skin was paler than before, his lips tinged faintly blue, his small frame trembling under the streetlight. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. They had caught the suspect, yes, but the victory felt hollow. The man's supplies told a story of danger too big for a single night, and the wound on Ethan's arm told the cruelest part. Daniel cuffed the suspect tighter, his jaw clenched with grim certainty. The boy was fading, and the damage might already be done. The flashing lights of the ambulance painted the alley in red and white as paramedics rushed past Daniel and dropped to their knees beside Ethan. The boy had collapsed against the brick wall, his head rolling weakly, his skin pale and damp with sweat. His breaths came shallow and uneven, each one sounding thinner than the last. One medic pressed an oxygen mask over his mouth, while another pushed a needle into his arm, their movements quick and urgent. A monitor beeped a rapid alarm that cut through the chaos, and Daniel's stomach clenched at the sound. Ethan's pulse was crashing, his vitals spiraling. "We need to know what it is," the lead medic shouted, his voice sharp with panic. "We can't treat what we can't identify." His partner looked at the wound, the swelling, the angry red lines creeping up Ethan's arm like dark veins. "It's spreading," she muttered, and the words landed like a blow. Daniel turned toward the suspect, still pinned against the wall by two officers. "What did you give him?" Daniel demanded, his voice like gravel. But the man only smirked, lips twisting with some cruel satisfaction. "You're too late," he sneered, his eyes glinting in the flashing lights. Daniel grabbed his collar, shaking him hard enough to rattle teeth. But the man only laughed, a hollow, empty sound that echoed against the bricks. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding, pulling Daniel's attention. The shepherd tugged at the strap of the abandoned backpack with his teeth, jerking it across the ground. He nosed inside, his claws scraping against the pavement as he pawed and sniffed with frantic urgency. Daniel dropped beside him, the smell of chemicals stinging his nose as Rex dug deeper. Then the dog froze, his muzzle pressing against a small glass vial wedged in the corner of the bag. He nudged it free, letting it roll across the ground toward Daniel's boots. Daniel scooped it up, holding it under the flashing lights. The liquid inside was cloudy, tinged faintly green, with a chemical label half torn but still visible. He turned it so the medics could see. The lead medic snatched it from his hand, eyes scanning the faded text. "It's a neurotoxin," he said, his face hardening. "Rare, but we've seen it before. He's not going to last long without the antivenom." One of the officers called for dispatch, demanding immediate delivery from the city's toxicology unit. The medic looked at Daniel with grim eyes. Best case, hours. Worst case, minutes. Daniel's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break his ribs. He glanced at Ethan, the boy's small chest rising weakly under the mask, his hand twitching against the stretcher. Rex whined low, stepping close to nuzzle the boy's arm, his amber eyes filled with something that looked almost like worry. Daniel knelt beside them, his hand tightening on the dog's scruff. "You found the answer, boy," he whispered, voice rough with fear and gratitude. The paramedics lifted Ethan onto a gurney, wheels clattering as they raced him toward the ambulance. Daniel climbed in after them, Rex leaping effortlessly up beside him. The doors slammed shut, the siren wailed, and the city blurred past the windows as they sped into the night. Time was no longer theirs. It belonged to the toxin eating through the boy's veins and to the hope that the vial Rex had found would be enough to save him before the last minute ran out. The ambulance screeched to a halt outside Oak Ridge Memorial, and the doors burst open as the paramedics hauled Ethan inside. His body looked small on the gurney, his face ashen, his lips pale. Monitors beeped frantic warnings while the team pushed through the wide sliding doors and into the emergency bay. Daniel kept close on their heels, his breath coming hard, his hand clenched so tight around his radio that his knuckles whitened. Rex ran at his side, leaping up each step with a determined pace, his nails clicking against the tile floors as if he belonged there more than anyone else. The doctors swarmed, voices overlapping as they worked. A specialist, with a calm but urgent tone, examined the vial that Daniel handed over. He tilted it under the fluorescent light, his eyes narrowing as he read the faded label. "It's a rare neurotoxin," he said finally, his words carrying the kind of weight that made Daniel's stomach drop. "Without the proper antivenom, this boy won't last." Another doctor rushed forward with charts and supplies. "Where's the nearest source?" Daniel asked, though his throat felt tight. "Richmond," the specialist replied, already moving toward the lab. "We'll need it rushed here, but it's hours away." "So tens. Match is wiver, hours." The word rang in Daniel's ears like a curse. Hours, when Ethan's body didn't look like it had minutes. He watched the boy twitch against the gurney, his breath shallow beneath the mask, his pulse skittering dangerously across the screen. The doctors worked quickly, starting IV fluids, pushing oxygen, but the toxin crept faster than their efforts could fight. One of them muttered, "He's fading," and Daniel felt his chest clench in helpless anger. Through it all, Rex stood firm, his body pressed against the side of the bed, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. Nurses tried to guide him back, but the shepherd refused, growling softly when hands came too close, not to threaten, but to warn. They backed off, realizing the boy was calmer with him there, the dog's presence a tether in a storm of panic. Ethan stirred faintly once, his hand slipping from under the blanket, his fingers brushing against Rex's ear. The dog lowered his head instantly, pressing close, a soft whine humming in his throat, as if promising he wouldn't let go. Daniel leaned against the wall, fighting the pounding of his heart, the helpless rage that filled him. He had seen danger before, had stood in alleys with guns drawn, but nothing felt as crushing as watching a child slip away while time mocked them. The doctors moved with precision, voices clipped, calling for the airlift of the antivenom, but even they couldn't hide the grim lines in their faces. Rex let out a low bark, drawing Daniel's eyes back to the bed. The dog's amber gaze flicked between Ethan and the monitors, as if urging Daniel to see what he already knew. The boy's vitals were dipping lower, the line on the screen faltering. Daniel stepped forward, his hand tightening on Rex's collar, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Hold on, kid. They're coming. Just hold on." The hospital grew quiet as the hours stretched deep into the night. The kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful but heavy, broken only by the hum of machines and the steady beeping of monitors. Ethan lay pale against the white sheets, his small chest rising and falling with effort, the mask fogging faintly with every weak breath. Nurses moved in and out softly, checking lines, adjusting the IV, speaking in low voices, as if afraid their words might disturb something fragile. The antivenom was on its way, but time moved like a slow knife, each minute sharpening the edge of fear. Rex had not moved from his place by the bed. He had leapt onto the gurney when they wheeled Ethan into the room, and only stepped down when the staff coaxed him gently, promising they would let him stay close. Now he stood with his front paws on the mattress, his head resting near Ethan's limp hand, amber eyes watching every rise and fall of the boy's chest. He refused food and water, refused to blink for long, his whole body anchored in a silent vigil. Every so often he whined softly, a sound so low and mournful it seemed to seep into the walls. Jack Miller sat slumped in the corner chair, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the night had pressed every ounce of strength from him. His face was lined with grief, his eyes red, his hands restless, clenching and unclenching as if they needed something to hold but found nothing solid enough. He stared at his son, then at the floor, then back again. A cycle of helplessness that offered no comfort. When the silence pressed too hard against him, the words broke out in a hoarse whisper. "Why him?" His voice cracked. "Why us?" Rex shifted at the sound, lifting his head, his ears flicking forward. He looked at Jack for a long moment, then lowered his muzzle back against the blanket, pressing closer to Ethan's hand. His eyes stayed steady, unwavering, as though he were answering the question in the only way he could, not with words but with presence. With a promise that he would not let go, Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice barely audible. "He's just a kid," he murmured. "He's all I've got." His breath shuddered as he spoke, the fear in him raw, the guilt simmering beneath it. He had raised his boy after his wife had passed, stumbling through fatherhood as best he could, and now here he sat, watching the most important thing in his life slip toward the edge. He rubbed his face with both hands, then dropped them uselessly to his lap. The hours dragged, the ticking clock louder in the silence, but Rex never wavered. Nurses whispered that they had never seen anything like it. A dog so still, so intent, as if holding the boy to the earth with nothing but loyalty. And when Ethan stirred faintly in the small hours, his lips forming a broken sound, Rex was already there, his nose nudging gently, his eyes burning steady, carrying the weight of hope when no one else could. The first gray light of morning crept through the blinds of the hospital room when the door opened, and a woman in a dark suit stepped inside. Cassidy Reynolds carried herself with the steady weight of someone used to walking into chaos and finding patterns inside it. Her badge caught the pale light for a second before she tucked it away again, her sharp eyes already sweeping the room, landing on Ethan's fragile form, and then on Rex, who still held his place at the side of the bed like stone carved into fur. She spoke softly, but her words cut through the heavy quiet. "I've seen this before." Daniel straightened from where he leaned against the wall, exhaustion in every line of his face. "You know what it is?" Cassidy nodded, her jaw tightening. "It's part of a bigger operation. They're using children as test subjects for experimental compounds, toxins no one should be handling, let alone injecting. The boy isn't random. He's a target." Jack's head snapped up from the chair where he sat hunched, eyes red from a night without sleep. "Target?" His voice cracked with disbelief and anger. "He's 12 years old. Who would?" He stopped himself, words broken by the weight of his own fury. Cassidy didn't flinch. "The man Rex caught last night is nothing more than a runner, a delivery boy. They call them foot soldiers. Disposable. The people behind this are higher up, shielded, smart enough to cover their tracks. He won't talk because he doesn't matter to them. They'll burn him out and move on to the next." Daniel felt the chill deepen in his bones. The alley, the syringe, the bag of chemicals, all of it was just one piece of a puzzle far darker than he had imagined. He glanced at Rex, who lifted his head at the sound of voices, amber eyes steady on Cassidy, as if weighing her words. "If this is bigger, then Ethan isn't safe even if we save him," Daniel said quietly. Cassidy gave a slow nod. "That's why I'm here. This isn't just about one boy. It's about every child they've touched and the ones they haven't yet. We've been tracking this group across 3 states. Every time we get close, they slip away. But last night your dog gave us something new." Jack stood then, anger and fear warring in his expression. "So what? My son's just evidence to you?" Cassidy met his gaze without flinching. "No. He's the reason we can finally pull the thread hard enough to unravel what's left of them. And I swear to you, Mr. Miller, I won't let this end with him." Rex shifted closer to Ethan, laying his head back on the blanket, but his ears twitched at every sound, as if he understood that the fight wasn't finished. The monitors beeped steadily, the boy's breathing still shallow. But inside that quiet hospital room, the truth settled like a storm waiting to break. The man in custody was nothing. The real threat was still out there, walking free, and Rex, scarred and steady, seemed to know it better than anyone. The room was heavy with the weight of waiting, the kind of waiting that steals strength from everyone inside it. The sky outside was pale, with the first trace of dawn, a thin light creeping past the blinds and falling across Ethan's still face. Jack sat hunched in the chair, his hand gripping his son's wrist, as though holding on could tether him to the world. Daniel leaned against the wall, silent, his eyes locked on the monitor that tracked each fragile heartbeat. Rex hadn't moved in hours, his head pressed close to the boy's side, his breathing steady, his eyes never closing for more than a blink. Then the sound came, sharp and merciless. The steady beeping that had filled the silence faltered, stretched into one long, unbroken note. The flatline ripped through the room, and in an instant, everything shattered. Jack shot upright, his face draining of color. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. Nurses burst in, shouting orders, their shoes pounding against the tile as they swarmed around the bed. A doctor called for epinephrine, another for chest compressions. The monitor screamed on, unrelenting, and the air filled with the frantic rhythm of life slipping away. Rex's body jolted as if struck by lightning. A sound tore from his throat, not a bark, but a raw, desperate howl that seemed to shake the walls. He leapt forward, his paws striking Ethan's chest, pressing down as if his own weight could force the boy's heart to remember its duty. His nails scrabbled against the thin blanket, his muzzle pushing at Ethan's shoulder, his cries a call no one could mistake. Jack shouted, reaching to pull him back, but Daniel caught his arm. "Wait," he whispered. Though his voice trembled, the staff hesitated, only for a breath. But in that breath, something shifted. Ethan's body twitched under Rex's paws, his lips parting as a faint rasp broke through the stillness. The monitor hiccuped, the flat line breaking into a stutter, then a faint, irregular beat. The doctors surged forward again, seizing the chance, pushing air into his lungs, pressing medicine into his veins. The noise built shouts, the pump of oxygen, the wild rhythm of the monitor struggling back to life. Jack pressed his hands to his mouth, tears blurring his vision as he whispered his son's name over and over. Rex stayed rooted, his body shaking but his eyes fierce, locked on Ethan as if refusing to let him slip away. The boy's chest rose again, shallow but real. The flat line faded into weak, uneven beeps, the sound of a fight renewed. Relief crashed through the room, in a wave that left everyone breathless. Minutes later, the doors burst open and a courier sprinted in with a cooler clutched tight to his chest. "Antivenom," he gasped. The doctor snatched it, snapping orders as vials were drawn and injected into Ethan's arm. The medication flowed into his veins, the monitors beginning to steady with every passing second. Jack collapsed back into the chair, his body shaking with relief, his face buried in his hands. Daniel leaned against the wall, his eyes wet despite himself. Rex lowered his head again beside the boy, his breath soft now, his body trembling from exhaustion but his gaze calm. Against the odds, Ethan was breathing. Weak, fragile, but alive. And for the first time since the night began, hope returned to the room. The sun was warm on the steps of the Oak Ridge Police Department as the town gathered, filling the courtyard with rows of folding chairs and restless voices. Weeks had passed since that night, when everything nearly slipped away. Weeks filled with long days in the hospital and cautious hope as Ethan slowly regained his strength. Now he stood between his father and Officer Daniel, still thinner than before, still pale around the edges, but alive, his eyes bright with the stubborn spirit that had carried him through the worst of it. Beside him, Rex sat tall and steady, his coat brushed to a sheen, his collar polished, the scars along his muzzle a reminder of battles survived. The chief stepped forward, his uniform pressed sharp, his voice carrying through the microphones as he spoke to the gathered crowd. He told them about courage, about service, about instinct and loyalty, but his eyes lingered most on the shepherd waiting at Ethan's side. "There are times when rules bend," the chief said, his voice ringing clear. "When instinct goes against training, and still it is the right choice. This dog did not just follow orders. He followed something greater." The chief reached down, his hand steady as he pinned a medal onto Rex's collar. The inscription glinted under the sunlight. "For valor above instinct." The crowd erupted in applause, cheers echoing off the brick walls of the station. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward with eager pens, but Rex did not move. He stood calm, his amber eyes sweeping the faces before him, his chest rising steady, as if the attention meant nothing compared to the boy at his side. Ethan stepped forward then, his small frame dwarfed by the sea of people, his voice quiet, but carrying farther than anyone expected. He wrapped his arms around the shepherd's neck, pressing his cheek to the rough fur, and whispered, "He didn't just see my hand. He saw me. He saved my life." The words silenced the crowd. No cheer, no clapping, only the sound of the boy's voice hanging in the air like truth carved in stone. The chief blinked hard. Daniel looked away to hide the shine in his eyes, and Jack wiped at his face openly, no longer caring who saw. Reporters lowered their pens for a moment, as though even they understood that some words didn't need embellishment. Rex leaned into the boy's hug, his tail giving one slow sweep across the ground, his eyes closing in a moment of quiet peace. The ceremony moved on speeches, photographs, handshakes, but for everyone present, the memory that remained was not the medal or the applause. It was the sight of a scarred shepherd and a 12-year-old boy holding each other in the golden light of morning, bound by something beyond training, beyond duty. An oath made not with words but with action, carved into every moment since that night. An oath that said no matter the darkness, no matter the danger, they would face it together. Thank you for watching this video of a dog's devotion. If you liked this story, show your support with a like, and join us by subscribing for more inspiring stories like this one.